It is plastered on every life coach's wall and every therapist's website, mine included. Be authentic. And you're convinced that you are because you've done the therapy, you've unpacked your childhood trauma, you journal, you reflect, you consider yourself self-aware. But I've got to ask, how do you know you are actually being real and authentic, or are you just playing it safe? Today is not another video about how to be yourself. My goal today is to challenge the idea of what authenticity actually is, because we talk about it a lot, but very few of us actually understand it. Not everything we call authenticity is truth. It's often just the version of us that feels safest in the moment. So the real question is it you, or is it just a performance to get something from the people around you? Most people hear the word authenticity and immediately translate it to mean honesty. So it becomes, if I'm authentic, I'm telling the truth, and if I'm telling the truth, I'm being authentic. But those two things, truthfulness and authenticity, are not the same. And here's why. Honesty is about expression. Expression is what comes out of you. Authenticity, on the other hand, is about alignment. It is about whether what comes out of you actually matches what is true inside of you. And here's the problem. You can be honest and still not be authentic. This might sound confusing at first, so let me give you a couple of examples of what I mean. Someone asks, do you want to go out tonight? And your response is, no, I'm just tired. That's honest because maybe you really are tired, but the full truth is that you really don't want to go. So while you didn't lie, you just protected the version of the truth that wouldn't create any tension. Okay, here's another example. Maybe your partner asks, babe, are you upset? And you say, no, I'm good. In that moment, you might be trying to be calm and trying not to be upset because you don't want to start something. But underneath, maybe you really are a little bit upset. You just don't want to deal with what will happen if you admit it. So again, you're being honest at the very surface level, but not authentic in your core. And something as simple as somebody telling a joke and you laugh. There's nothing about that that's being dishonest. I would say that's probably just being polite. But if you really actually didn't think it was funny, even something that small can be considered a performance. And the point is that most people aren't lying intentionally. They're just telling the version of the truth that makes them feel safest in the moment. And here's the thing. Everyone is pretending. Everyone is performing and managing their image to ensure that you don't see their unacceptable parts. And that is the gap I'm talking about today, because that's where honesty and authenticity kind of veer into two different directions. Now, I want you to ask yourself, do you speak to your partner the same way you do to your friends, or your boss, or your parents, or your kids? Of course not. Because you're really just filtering and adjusting based on who you're around. And this isn't something we just do occasionally. This is how most of us relate to each other all the time. Not by lying necessarily, but by adjusting. Adjusting what we say, adjusting how we say it, and adjusting which parts of ourselves we allow to show. And we've normalized this so much that we call it things like social awareness or just being able to read the room. but it's actually what I consider code switching. Now, originally code switching was referred to the way that people would switch between languages or dialects depending on the situation that they were in. Over time, the term expanded to describe how people, especially those in marginalized groups, would adjust their speech, their behavior, their tone, and expression in order to navigate different social environments safely. So you hear about it a lot when you're talking about culture. Here's the thing, code switching came to be understood as a survival strategy. But what we don't talk about enough is how we all do this psychologically. We are adjusting not just how we speak, but which parts of ourselves we allow to show based on our environment. We don't just change our behavior, we actually change access to parts of who we are depending on who we're around. Now, the problem is that everyone thinks that they're the only ones doing this because they've been conditioned to believe that authenticity is something you perform. So something you demonstrate through openness and vulnerability and expression. But you guys, that version of authenticity is simply another performance. So now you're not just adapting to your environment, you're also trying to perform authenticity. And this is why you can't talk about authenticity without talking about fragmentation. When different environments start getting access to different parts of you, you stop questioning what is true for me and start asking what version of me works best here. And then, to make matters worse, we think we're the only ones who do this. Like we're the only ones who agree when we really don't. Like we're the only one who holds back opinion. Like we're the only one who pretends to be confident when we're really, really unsure about things. We assume everyone else around us is being real, authentic, and genuine. So then it becomes not just about performing, it becomes about not getting caught performing. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say there's a woman named Emily who's in a relationship. With her partner, she's easygoing, she doesn't bring up things that bother her, she's very low maintenance. But with her friends, she's expressive and opinionated and confident, even sometimes frustrated about her relationship. Now here's the problem. Her partner thinks he's dating someone who's chill and flexible and easygoing, but her friends know a completely different version of her. And Emily, she doesn't even know which one is real anymore. So what happens? Her relationships are not built on who she is. They are built on who she's been in each different environment and what feels safest. Now let's take a look at this from the inside. Let's say there's a guy named Mark. Mark is in a work meeting and he has an idea, a strong idea. But as the conversation starts, he starts scanning the room and notices not just who's in the room, but also who's getting approval, who doesn't, the people that are getting shut down. And so he adjusts by softening his opinion, adding disclaimers, explaining himself, and then holding things back that he'd really like to say. Now, the meeting's going to go fine because there's not going to be any conflict or tension. But when he leaves, he's going to feel off because he wasn't fully there. He wasn't present. And the more this happens, the harder it becomes to even know what his unfiltered opinions are anymore. This is where things compound because the more you perform, the more you conceal certain aspects of yourself. And the more you conceal aspects of yourself, the more isolated you feel. And the more isolated you feel, the more convinced you are that you are the only one alone. So, what do? You perform even harder. Now you're in a full-blown loop where you perform, conceal, isolate, and then fear being exposed, so you perform even more. If there is one thing that is true for all of us, it is this. The loneliest thing in the world isn't being alone. It is being surrounded by people who don't actually know you. They know who you've learned how to be, not who you actually are. Let that sink in. Now I want to offer a new perspective on authenticity. But here's where I'm going to push back on something that's really popular right now. This idea that authenticity means say everything you think and just be radically honest. Speak your truth no matter what. You guys, that is not authenticity. That is impulsivity dressed up as courage. The full, unfiltered expression of you isn't just unrealistic, it is destructive. Because if you are being honest, the real you isn't always some peaceful, enlightened being. It's reactive, it's irritated, it keeps score. And authenticity is not about dumping your raw thoughts onto people. It doesn't mean you should be unfiltered. And it definitely doesn't mean you should stop adapting entirely. Authenticity is actually much, much more disciplined than that. Because there are times when you will intentionally not express something fully. And that's not inauthentic, it's actually discernment. So let me give you some examples of healthy inauthenticity. So an example might be you don't tell your boss everything you think, not because you're afraid, but because you understand context, timing, and consequence. Another example, maybe you don't unload every single frustration onto your partner the moment you feel it. And it's not because you're hiding, but because you're choosing to respond instead of react. Or maybe you don't say every critical thought that crosses your mind, not because it's not authentic, but because you realize that not every thought deserves to be expressed. The difference is this question: are you filtering out of fear or are you filtering on purpose? Because when it's unconscious, it sounds like, I don't want to upset them and I don't want to be rejected and I don't want to deal with the consequence or reaction of this. So you shrink who you are. You soften your personality and you adjust your values to the situation. When it is intentional, it sounds more like, this just isn't the right time, or this won't move the conversation forward, or I want to say this in a way that actually lands, so I'm going to give it some time. The difference is that you choose, you regulate, and you stay aligned when it's conscious. Authenticity isn't about full expression. It's about conscious expression. Authenticity is simply eliminating what is not true. It's not saying more. It's actually about saying less. Even small lies, like agreeing when you don't, or laughing when it's not really funny, or saying it's fine when it's not, because authenticity isn't about full expression. It is about alignment. So your thoughts, your words, and your behavior all match and align. Now, I feel like I need to ground this so it doesn't get twisted, because this isn't about judging yourself. You must realize that this is an adaptive strategy that you learned for a reason. Belonging and attachment matter so much that we split ourselves off in order to maintain connection to others. So of course you adjusted. We all do, and we all have. The problem isn't that it exists, it's that it's happening unconsciously. And anything unconscious will eventually cost you. Because when you're constantly managing how you're being perceived, you actually lose the ability to accurately attune to other people because you're so busy managing your image. And the people in your life will feel it. And then you're going to wonder why you feel so disconnected. The truth is that healthy relationships are built on congruence and authenticity, not the best performance. Even though most of us can't explain it, performance deteriorates trust and creates distance, even when we don't want it consciously. So here's where I want to leave you. Just one time this week, try to catch yourself. Right before you adjust to somebody, or right before you go to agree to something you don't really want to do, or right before you perform in order to gain acceptance. And instead of forcing yourself to say something, just pause. Because one of the most powerful things that you can do is to stop filling space with things that aren't true. And when you do this, you will begin to notice how often you've been editing yourself and shaping your responses and choosing what's acceptable over what's real for you. And once you see it, it is really hard to unsee it. When you start to notice how often you adjust and stop performing all the time, the people in your life who were attached to the person you were trying to be will start to fall away. And the ones who move closer, those are your people, because they're not connected to your performance. They're actually genuinely connected to you. And this leads me to a much bigger question for you today. If the people in your life only know the version of you that feels safe, are they actually in a relationship with you?